Hey folks, this is Rhykker with the Diablo 3 patch 2.6 beta update video. The Necromancer has been re-added to the beta, and along with it, all 4 class sets, and we get a sneak peek at the legendary items that are incoming. We can't actually access them, but we can see them in the cube. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the new sets, what they look like, what they do, our preliminary thoughts, as well as go over the legendary items. The Necromancer also came back with some skill changes, so in future videos we'll go over those, as well as continue our tour of the Necromancer's skills, which we had to interrupt because the Necromancer was removed from beta. Note that on the beta we currently are testing Season 11, and some people have interpreted this to mean that the Necromancer may come at Season 11, which is earlier than I expected, but it could also just be that Blizzard doesn't have a definite plan for what season it'll be, so they just named it Season 11 for now. Still no price though. The first set we'll take a look at is the pet set, the minion set. Now, one thing to note is that a lot of assets are still placeholder, like names. Anywhere that you see PH, that's a placeholder. While we do now have a lot of the art for the skills, there still are some placeholder assets in this game. So with the pet set, 2-piece bonus, your minions have a chance to reduce the cooldown of Army of the Dead by 1 second each time they deal 1 second. Now, Blizzard doesn't write what this percentage is, what this chance to trigger this effect is, but in practice, assuming you have enough pets, it happens often enough. The 4-piece bonus, you gain 1% damage reduction for 5 seconds each time one of your minions deal damage, max 50 stacks. Now, it's not difficult to maintain this buff, but one thing I will say is that there will be moments when this falls off. I believe other classes are able to maintain their damage reduction buff more consistently. And when you're pushing higher greater rifts and you can't get that damage stack up right away, one shot's gonna kill you. So I'm a little skeptical of this, but overall it seems that this set is actually performing the best currently. The 6-piece bonus, each active skeleton mage increases the damage of your minions and Army of the Dead by 200%. Now, when the set bonuses were data mined, I actually wasn't too impressed by this set, but in practice, I do enjoy running it. Army of the Dead is just such an awesome power, and doing what you can to be able to cast that as often as possible is really fun. It has a super cool visual effect, depending on the rune, of course, but and there's one rune that's not quite working right now, it seems bugged. That would be the Unconventional Warfare rune, but overall this set does seem to have potential. Visually, the pet set it's pretty cool. It's not what I would have expected for the pet set, but you can't say it isn't necro-themed. The next set we're going to take a look at is the Blood set, the Trag'Oul set. While it's not in the game, if you read the patch notes on the Diablo 3 website, you can see that this set is tentatively called Trag'Oul's Avatar. The previous set, the pet-based set, was Bones of Rathma. So our 2-piece bonus here, Blood Rush gains the effect of every rune. Pretty straightforward, very useful. Blood Rush is the Necromancer's teleport, it's dashing strike, it's movement power. Gaining every rune is a nice little bonus, and I can see this being used in a lot of builds, particularly speedrunning builds. 4-piece bonus, while at full life, your healing from skills is added to your max life for 45 seconds, up to 100% more. This allows us to effectively double our health. And the 6-piece, spending 10% life, grants you a stack of Blood Cascade. Each stack of Blood Cascade increases the damage of life-spending attacks by 200%, but also increases the life you lose by 10%. Using a skill to heal will consume a stack and heal for 300% more. So this set is about balancing that 6-piece bonus. It's about maintaining enough of these stacks to deal a good amount of damage, while also healing when you need it. Now, one thing to note, where it says, but it also increases the life you lose by 10%, that doesn't mean it goes from 10% to 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 to ultimately costing you 100% of your health. What it means is, if the skill normally costs 10%, then 10% more is 1 additional percent. So it's gonna go from 10 to 11%. That's a lot more reasonable. So in this particular build, the heal skill we're using is Blood Rush, because the Transfusion rune makes you heal for 2% of your maximum health for every enemy that you pass through. This is perhaps one of the most interesting forms of, I guess, lifesteal or of healing in the game thus far. You have to teleport through enemies, and the more you teleport through, the more health you regain. How many stacks do you need exactly for the 6-piece bonus? Well, it tends to be around maybe 15. At 15 stacks, you're dealing 15 times 200% additional damage. That's 3,000% additional damage. Now we're talking. So it's certainly an interesting mechanic or playstyle to have to balance how much you heal versus how much damage you deal. Visually, the set is super cool, and it actually dies very well as well. Next, we have the Grace of Inarius set. This is the Bone Armor set, the Necromancer. 2-piece set bonus, bone armor damage is increased by 1000%. 4-piece bonus, bone armor stacks are now refreshed. In addition, bone armor grants an additional 2% damage reduction per enemy hit. So if we look at our bone armor skill, for instance, it's on a 10-second cooldown. The description, rip bones from nearby enemies. If there's no enemies nearby, you can't activate it. Dealing 125% weapon damage. That's modified by the 1000% buff, so it's about 10 times more damage. And create armor that reduces damage taken by 3% per enemy hit, up to a maximum of 10 enemies. Last 60 seconds. So typically, you would have 30% damage reduction from this. With this set, we're going up to 50%. And that's pretty standard. Most classes have sets that give you about 50% damage reduction in some form or another. Then lastly, the 6-piece bonus, bone armor also activates a swirling tornado of bone, damaging nearby enemies for 375% weapon damage, and increases the damage they take from the Necromancer by 850%. So this is not what was expected. Overall, this is cool, and I was really looking forward to this set, and I think mechanically it's really interesting, but power-wise, it's kind of in the gutter right now. In the Datamine patch notes, that number was going to be 1,500% increased damage. Looks like it went live with about half of that, and even the 1,500 may not have quite been enough. Yes, Bone Armor is already receiving that 1,000% damage buff, but Bone Armor won't be our main source of damage. It's on a 10-second cooldown. So while overall very cool, and the visual of having that bone storm swirling around is really nice, and it's a nice callback to the Diablo 2 Necromancer Bone Armor. It doesn't quite feel powerful enough yet, but really that's just a matter of dialing up the numbers. Visually, this is my favorite Necromancer set. Arguably, this is my favorite set in the game from a visual standpoint. I love the way it looks, and it dies really well. Then our last set, we have the Pestilence Master's Shroud. This is the Bone Spear set. The visual doesn't quite match the whole Bone Spear thing. It's pretty weird, because it's a Plague Doctor set, right? That's the visual appearance. Plague Doctor, even the name indicates, okay, this should be sort of plague/poison oriented. But there is no real poison-oriented build, and it just kind of seems like, well, we don't really know where to fit things here thematically, so we're going to just call this, we're going to make the Bone Spear set this. I almost feel that the Bones of Rathma set kind of fits Bone Spear better. I don't know. It's a little odd. Visually, it's very cool. It doesn't die very well for the moment, but here are the set bonuses. Each corpse you consume fires a corpse lance at a nearby enemy. This effect is particularly insane when you combine it with Land of the Dead. What does Land of the Dead say? All corpse skills can be used at will for 10 seconds. So that's basically 10 seconds of you being able to constantly spam Corpse Lance, shooting off volleys of these spines. It looks really cool. It feels very impressive. The 4-piece bonus, each enemy you hit with Bone Spear reduces your damage taken by 2%, up to a max of 50%. Lasts 15 seconds. And the 6-piece bonus, each corpse you consume grants you an empowered Bone Spear charge that increases the damage of your next Bone Spear by 1000%. So in practice, it seems you'll always have empowered Bone Spears to throw. So a Bone Spear doing 1000% more damage is certainly nothing to balk at. Does it need to be tuned up a little bit? Maybe not, due to some supplementary legendaries. And we also gotta consider that some of our damage will be coming from the Corpse Lances. See, Corpse Lance is a skill in which you target an enemy to summon projectiles from nearby corpses that cause 900% weapon damage to the target. So that's already doing 3 times the base damage of a Bone Spear. While not super significant in and of itself compared to the empowered Bone Spear, there's going to be lots of these Corpse Lances shooting out. So it does end up contributing to your overall damage. Now, Desolacer actually put together a ridiculous build that revolves around, it's basically a blood build. He's constantly using blood powers, sapping away at his own life to deal as much damage as possible. He is shooting off the blood spear. I thought that would be an issue. I thought that the obvious choice would be either teeth or shatter, those two runes on bone spear, as we spoke about in our secondary skill video. But he's actually using blood spear to max out his damage. And he's got a whole build that revolves around regenerating health. And if you look at the playstyle, I'd encourage you to go check him out on Twitch, twitch.tv/Desolacer. You look at his health globe, and it is constantly jumping up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's not because he's getting hit, it's because he's consuming his own life. I wasn't very excited by this set until I found out about that playstyle, because it's something that shakes up the status quo. I loved Thorn's builds when they first emerged because it was something very different from everything else. It required different itemization. And similarly, this follows suit. As Desolacer was explaining, you actually want to minimize how much toughness you get from Vitality. So instead of Vitality, you're trying to get Armor. You're trying to get All Resist. And you want Regeneration, a Molten Wildebeest Gizzard. Because why? Well, healing is more effective the less health you have. This was a vanilla concept that was very important, and it sort of became less important as itemization kind of changed going into Reaper of Souls. But think of it this way. Let's say two different people have 10 million toughness each. One guy has no resistances. All of his toughness comes from Vitality. The other person, let's say 5 million comes from All Resist and Armor and all that stuff, and the other 50% comes from Vitality. The smaller your health pool, the fewer overall hit points you have, the greater you're affected by healing. Both characters have equal toughness, sure, but the guy that has half the health of the other guy, he's benefiting twice as much from healing. So he can recover, go back to max health just as often, and his effective hit points remains the same. Why? 50% damage reduction. I do find it odd that it wasn't the blood set that was being used to make this build, that it's the Bone Spear set, but I'm pleasantly surprised at the combo that has emerged. And again, visually it's pretty cool. It doesn't die well. The helm in particular, it seems like they haven't yet set it up to die properly. I'm hoping for that to change. But that covers the sets. Let's take a look at the legendary items now. We cannot obtain these yet, but we can see them in the cube. So we have a few here that are just placeholders. There's not yet any legendary power. Then we get to the phylacteries. So it's the one-handed scythes that don't have any powers. The phylacteries. Skeletal mages last an additional 1 second. They typically last 6 seconds. An additional 1 second. It's something. It's not something that gets me excited, but it's a number that could still see some tuning. Next phylactery. When an exploded corpse damages at least one enemy, your corpse explosion deals 100% increased damage for 6 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. That's really cool. I would like to see that worked into a build, and I can't wait to play with it. Next phylactery. Your Necromancer minions have a 100% chance to apply a random curse on hit. That's a fun little effect. 100% chance they're always going to apply curses. And now in D3 you can stack curses, so you can have all 3 of your curses stacked on enemies, and looks like it's going to happen pretty often. The next phylactery, Bone Spear, now costs 40 essence and deals 100% increased damage. And there it is. That's why we probably won't have to see any changes made to the 6-piece bonus for the Bone Spear set. Though to be honest, the doubling of the essence cost leaves me questioning things a little bit. Yes, it's dealing double damage, but at twice the essence cost. So really, doesn't that cancel out? It's effectively the same thing as saying that Bone Spear casts twice as quickly. There might be some interactions that I'm not factoring in here, so I'm going to reserve judgment on that, but it would not surprise me if ultimately the essence cost was brought down to maybe 30. This way it's not exactly just an even trade of essence for damage that balances out to the same thing. And interestingly, the two-handed scythes have been implemented. So we got this one here, Bone Spikes, Bone Spear, and Bone Spirit deal 100% increased damage against enemies that are stunned, frozen, charmed, feared, or blinded. So double damage versus crowd-controlled enemies. Now, assuming the phylactery is going to be viable, then I imagine these 2 items will be used, one equipped, one in the cube for the Bone Spear set. Next scythe, your damage reduction is increased by 100% for every 2% life you are missing. That is interesting. I'm not sure how that's going to work. If you have 50% damage reduction, then that's going to increase by 100%. That means it's going to double. So you're going to have 100% damage reduction? I may be misinterpreting this. or that number is just a placeholder and that's not what we're going to see go live. I think 1% makes more sense there. When this was initially data mined, it was your damage reduction is increased by 1% for every 2% life you are missing. This didn't seem very powerful, but it made a lot more sense. There's got to be some fair compromise between 100% and 1%. Next scythe, you gain 100% increased movement speed for 2 seconds after using Blood Rush. I suppose that could be good for speedruns, factor in an Ingam, and you're able to pop Blood Rush fairly often, so I can see speed builds using this. And lastly, after consuming 1 corpse, you unleash a free Death Nova. Now when this was data mined, this was after consuming 15 corpses. And in my video I was like, that's not really impressive. Maybe after 5 corpses you get a free Death Nova. I like that they put it to 1. So every 1 corpse you get a free Death Nova. Obviously they're still going to tool this number, but now we're talking. I'm glad there has been some negotiation with this. Now this is an item that has me excited. So that's going to wrap up our look at the new stuff. Again, these are our preliminary thoughts. We're going to do some further analysis, but leave a comment with your thoughts. Are you liking what you're seeing so far? That wraps up this video. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.